There is a wooden garage on the west side of a main street in Clarkson, Nebraska, that looks like every other machine shed in the county. Dark inside, hammers on the walls, scrap steel on the floor. The man who worked there sharpened more than 60,000 plowshares in his lifetime, and once, to settle an argument, he cut the lock off a jail cell with a knife he had made by hand. Ripley's Believe It or Not put him in a newspaper cartoon in 1936. Generals carried his blades into the Second World War. And today, most of the knives that came out of that shed sit in drawers, unrecognized, priced by people who have never heard his name. That is not an accident. That is the whole game. Because the hunting knives worth serious money right now were not built to look valuable. They were built to look like tools. Plain, honest, forgettable. Made by men who signed their work in steel because they lived close enough to the buyer to be held to it. The name and the town stamped into the tang, a signature. And a signature only means something as long as the person behind it can still be found. This is the story of 15 signatures, and of what happened when the companies that inherited them kept the name on the blade and quietly let the man who earned it walk out of the building. Here is what the people already inside this market understand, and most sellers never get told. Condition matters, but not the way the sporting goods shelf taught you. A recognized name matters, but often it is the recognition that costs you money, not the ignorance. What actually drives the value of an old hunting knife is a single question. Is the signature on this blade a real one, made by a hand that answered for it, or is it a name that outlived the person who deserved it? Learn to tell those two apart, and a flea market table stops being junk and starts reading like a library. We are counting down from 15. Somewhere in the middle, we will stop for 60 seconds, because there is a document waiting for you, and it is worth more than this video. Let's begin where the trap is biggest. Number 15. Winchester hunting knives. Here is the biggest name on this list, and that is exactly the problem. You see Winchester stamped on a fixed blade and your mind fills in the rest. A modern licensed import. A gift shop souvenir. Something to price at $10 while feeling generous. But Winchester was a serious knife maker in its own right in the 1920s and early 1930s. Carbon steel hunting patterns, stag and stacked leather handles, built when the company put the same name on its blades that it put on its rifles. Then the Depression closed that chapter, and for decades the Winchester name on cutlery was licensed out, stamped onto knives the original company never touched, so the name tells you almost nothing. The tang stamp tells you everything. An early Winchester-marked hunter from the New Haven era is a different object entirely from the reproduction that shares its name, and the person buying yours for $10 already knows which one is lying in his hand. The signature is real. The recognition is the trap. Number 14. Schrade Old-Timer, stamped Usay. This one catches sellers constantly, because you have seen an old-timer your whole life. There is one at the hardware store right now, so you price it at $5 and move on. But the Schrade factory in Ellenville, New York, closed its doors in late July of 2004, and everything made in that building before that date is original American production. The steel is different. The grind is different. After the bankruptcy, the name was bought and the work moved overseas. Today it belongs to Smith & Wesson, and the knives still carry the old-timer name. So two knives sit side by side, nearly identical. One is worth $80 to the right buyer. One is worth $4. The tang stamp is the whole difference. SA means Ellenville, a signature from a building that no longer makes anything. No USA means a name that kept working after the hand that earned it clocked out for the last time. Number 13. Camillus Cutlery. And this is where the signature gets strange, because for most of its life, Camillus signed its finest work with other companies' names. Camillus, out of Camillus, New York, was one of the oldest and largest cutlery works in the country, and it survived as long as it did by becoming the ghost in the machine. The contract shop that built knives to be stamped Sears, or Craftsman, or a dozen other brands that never ground a blade in their lives. When you find an old fixed blade under a store name that feels better in the hand than a store name has any right to feel, flip it, study the construction. You may be holding a Camillus that was never allowed to sign its own work. Camillus closed in the winter of 2007, after more than a century, and when it went down, it took the Western brand with it. A company that spent 100 years lending its hand to other people's signatures, and then one winter simply stopped answering. The knives it made under its own name are quietly becoming the ones collectors chase. Number 12. Marbles, out of Gladstone, Michigan. Most people half recognize the name, assume mid-tier sporting goods, and price it at $10. Here is the part the name does not tell you. Marbles did not start as a knife company. Webster Marble was a timber cruiser who patented a rifle sight and a folding safety axe, and incorporated the Marble Safety Axe Company in 1898. The knife, the famous ideal hunting knife, came almost as an afterthought, and it became one of the most respected sporting blades in America. Theodore Roosevelt carried Marble's gear on his East Africa expedition in 1909. Marbles popularized the stacked leather washer handle that half this list is built on. Here is the decode. The earliest Marbles pocket knives were not even made by Marbles. They were made under contract by Case, marked with the XX. Even at the beginning, the signature on the blade and the hand behind it were already two different things. A pre-transition Marbles with correct hardware and its original sheath is not a $10 knife. Not close. Number 11. Queen Cutlery, out of Titusville, Pennsylvania. This name means less to the general public every year, and that is precisely why it belongs here. Queen grew straight out of the old Scat and Morgan works. It inherited the bones, the tooling, and the hands of an earlier generation of cutlers, and for decades it made traditional pocket and hunting patterns with a fit and finish that punched far above what the price suggested. Collectors who follow American traditional knives can read a Queen Tang stamp across a table and name the decade. Queen closed for good in 2018. Which means every genuine Queen is now a closed signature, a name that will never sign another blade. The market has not fully caught up to that, and the gap between what these bring at a general estate sale and what they bring inside the collector world is still wide open. The person who quietly buys yours is betting on the one thing that never comes back, the maker who is already gone. Number 10. Western, and the family that turns this whole list into a single bloodline. You will find Western fixed blades stamped Boulder, Colorado, with stacked leather handles and carbon steel taper grinds, and most sellers price them like generic vintage. But look at who signed them. Western States Cutlery was founded in 1911 by H.N. Platts, and the Platts family were American cutlery royalty. Trace the line back, and it runs to Charles Platts, who emigrated from Sheffield, England, in 1864, from a long line of English blade makers. His descendants did not just start Western. They worked at, married into, and seeded Cattaraugus and W.R. Case, and sons as well. Case, Cattaraugus, Western. Different names on the blades, one family behind the signatures. The Platts family led Western until 1984, when it was sold to Coleman. It passed to Camillus, and it died when Camillus died. A Boulder-era Western is the signature of a Sheffield dynasty that quietly ran a third of American cutlery, and almost nobody at the estate sale knows they are holding it. Number 9. Remington Hunting Knives, the Row H series. Everyone knows Remington made rifles and ammunition. Almost nobody remembers that in the 1920s, Remington was the largest knife manufacturer in America. More than 2,000 patterns, millions of blades a year, out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. The fixed blade hunters were marked RH, Remington Hunting. Then the Depression came, and Remington made a choice. In 1940, it sold the entire cutlery operation to a company called PAL, so it could turn its full attention to guns and ammunition for the coming war. PAL kept building the exact same knives, with the exact same model numbers, right down to the pattern. Here is the decode most people miss. That Remington hunting design, carried on by PAL, is the direct ancestor of the fighting knife the Marines would carry across the Pacific, the knife the whole world now calls a Ka-Bar. The signature changed hands twice before the war even started. The blade stayed the same. Keep that in mind, because Ka-Bar is coming. Number 8. Cattaraugus Cutlery. And to understand why it matters, you have to understand where it stood. Little Valley, New York, in the late 1800s, was known as the Village of Knives. At the peak, roughly 70 cutlery companies operated within 50 miles of it. The densest concentration of blade makers in the Western Hemisphere, staffed by masters recruited from Sheffield and Zolingen. They called it the Magic Circle. Cattaraugus sat at the center. It was founded by the Champlin family in the 1880s, Alongside the Case brothers, and its factory superintendent in 1891 was a Platts, the same family from number 10. During the Second World War, it made the 225Q quartermaster knife and won government excellence flags. Then, in 1963, the family agreed to close the doors, and the village of knives began to empty out for good. A Cattaraugus in a drawer is not just an old knife. It is a shard of a vanished industrial civilization, a whole town that made steel and then disappeared. Before we go on, that document we promised. We built a field dossier to go with this video. The full timeline of every maker on this list, a specifications table, the tang stamp tells that separate the real signatures from the leftovers, and the sourced auction figures behind the numbers you are hearing. It is, honestly, more useful than the video. It is the thing you would actually carry to an estate sale. The code is on your screen. It costs nothing. Point your camera, and it is yours. Now, the second half of this list is where the money gets serious. Number 7. Ka-bar, but not the one you are picturing. Everyone knows the marine fighting knife. That recognition is exactly what hurts sellers who find the earlier, civilian hunting patterns. The company began as Tid-i-Ut Cutlery, became Union Razor, then Union Cutlery, and settled in Olean, New York, in 1911. For decades, Ka-bar was just one trademark among several that Union stamped on its blades. The name itself, the story goes, came from a fur trapper's letter in rough English, thanking the company for a knife he had used to kill a wounded bear, kill a bar, Ka-bar. The company liked it so much, it eventually became the name of the whole company in 1952. So if you find a Union Cutlery or early Ka-bar fixed blade that does not look like the military pattern, stag handles, a 1930s hunting shape, do not assume it is a lesser knife. It is an earlier one. And one more decode. Some Union pocket knives from this era were not even made in Olean. They were made under contract by Queen. Number 11, again. The signatures on this list keep borrowing each other's hands. Number 6. German hunting blades from Solingen. Here, American estate sale logic betrays sellers badly because it treats anything without a USA stamp as automatically worth less. Solingen is the opposite of less. Solingen has forged blade steel to an exacting standard for centuries. It is the reason the village of knives had to import its masters from there in the first place. A Solingen-marked hunting knife with a stag handle, correct brass, and a fitted leather sheath is a serious object because of where, when, and to what standard it was made. The Herder houses alone, Robert Herder, founded in 1872 and still grinding blades to a thinness machines can barely copy, and the related Herder workshop that made the stag-handled skinners represent a level of fit most casual sellers mistake for an ordinary old import. The collector who specializes in European blades operates from the opposite assumption to yours and walks the sale before you understand what is on the table. A foreign signature is still a signature. And Solingen's is one of the oldest in the world. Number 5. Frank J. Richtig of Clarkson, Nebraska. The man from the machine shed we opened with. A blacksmith who became famous in the 1930s for a single demonstration. He would hammer one of his knives clean through a steel bar, then shave paper with the same edge. Ripley's, believe it or not, made him a national name in 1936. He gave knives to soldiers heading off to war. Eisenhower, Nimitz, and MacArthur all received his work. For decades, the legend held that Richtig had a secret heat treatment he took to his grave. And here is the decode, the one that makes this channel worth your time. In the year 2000, metallurgists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory actually cut apart 2 of his blades and studied them. Their finding: the toughness was real. They reproduced the steel cutting themselves. But the magic was not some lost formula. It was mostly geometry and a sound, careful heat treatment. The legend said sorcery. The documents say craft. And the knife is worth more for the truth, not less, because the truth is a real man in a real shed who was simply that good. His signature reads Vchbayar, Clarkson, Nebraska. If you see it, stop. Number 4. Case XX, where partial knowledge costs more than none at all. You see Case XX on a hunting knife, you assume you understand it, and you price it against what a new case costs at the counter today. That is the mistake. case built a calendar into its steel. Starting in 1970, every knife tang carried 10 dots. 1 dot was removed each year. 9 dots for 71. 5 dots for 75. A single dot for 79. In 1980, they started the 10 over again, this time with a stylized lightning bolt S collectors. Read that in 3 seconds. A pre-1970 case hunting knife, in a correct pattern with its original sheath, is a different object from one made last year under the same name. Different steel, different tolerances, different world. The company itself goes back to 4 brothers selling knives off a wagon in 1889. The signature is a running record, stamped year by year into the tang. The seller who cannot read the dots prices it wrong every single time. The collector counts them, smiles, and pays what you asked. Number 3. Ruana, out of Bonner, Montana. Most people who find one have never heard the name, which is the point, because Rudy Ruana never needed them to. In 1937, a tornado destroyed his family's North Dakota farm. Heading west, his trailer broke down on a bridge in Bonner, and he stayed. He began forging knives on the side around 1938 and did not go full-time until 1952. Heavy, full-tang hunting knives with elk antler handles, built for men who used them hard in the mountains. His shop was a converted auto garage with no sign on the front. You could drive past it and never know one of the great American knife lineages was working inside. Here is the decode that separates real money from wishful thinking. Early Ruanuds can be dated by the handle and the stamp. Square antler inserts point to the earliest years, and the Rage Ruana Bonner, Montana stamp begins in 1944. Collectors call an original simply a Rudy. A Rudy priced at $20 in a Montana estate box is not worth $20. It is priced at $20 because the seller never heard of the man who signed it, and the buyer drove 4 hours because he had. Number 2. Randall Made Knives, out of Orlando, Florida. These appear at estate sales priced like ordinary old hunting knives, and the mistake can cost thousands. In 1936, a citrus rancher named W.D. Randall watched a man scrape paint off a boat with a knife that came away without a mark. He bought that knife on the spot, tracked down the man who made it, and became his student. He opened his own shop in Orlando in 1938 and built a reputation so deep the waiting list eventually stretched to years. A Randall went into space. A Randall went to war on the hip of a downed U-2 pilot. Documented early examples have cleared $5,000, and correct ones with papers have gone much higher. They do not announce themselves. They sit in a tackle box or a gun safe until someone empties it into a cardboard box. If you find a fixed blade with an Orlando, Florida maker's mark, stop completely. Photograph everything. Do not price it. Ask first. And the man who taught Randall to make that first knife? He is number one, William Scagel, and the unmarked knives of the men he taught. Scagel worked out of Michigan in the first half of the 20th century, largely alone, powering his shop off an automobile engine, making everything by hand. He is widely called the father of the American custom knife. He was the man bow Randall found. His designs run through Randall, through Loveless, through nearly every serious American maker who came after. An original Scagel is a museum piece. Verified examples have sold well past $10,000, and the supply, by definition, will never grow. But that is not why he sits at number 1. He sits here because of the knives made by the men he influenced. The regional bladesmiths of the 1940s and 50s who learned from his example and made serious work in small numbers before the custom knife world had shows, or magazines, or a name for what they were doing. Those knives carry no famous stamp. They look like old hunting knives because that is exactly what they are. Made at the moment the American craft was at its peak, by a man in a small building making the best knife he knew how to make for whoever needed one. The signature is faint. Sometimes there is not one at all. And that is precisely how the best of them keep slipping through the sale for $6. Now, here is where most sellers lose the most money, and it is not in failing to spot the right knife. It is in what they do to it before they ever name a price. The instinct is almost universal. Clean it up. Wipe the blade bright, condition the leather, polish the brass, make it presentable. That instinct destroys value in ways that cannot be undone. Collectors are not buying these to carry into the field next fall. They are buying them as documented objects, and the dark patina on a carbon steel blade is not dirt. It is the record of the steel's age. The worn surface of a stacked leather handle is evidence. The unpolished guard is information. Think of it this way. The patina is part of the signature. Strip it off with metal polish, and you have erased the very thing that proves the hand was ever there. The same knife, in worse-looking condition with its original surfaces intact, can bring 2 or 3 times as much to the right buyer. And the sheath in the drawer next to it is not a bonus. It is half the sale. A Randall with its original marked sheath is a different auction lot from a Randall without one. A Ruana with a sheath carrying the maker's stamp is not the same object as the same knife loose. The sheath is documentation, proof the knife has traveled as a single unit since the day it left the maker's hand. Most sellers throw it away or toss it in as an afterthought. Look in the drawer above where the knife sat. Look in the old cigar box. Look in the gun safe behind the rifle. Find it before you price anything. So before you donate the box, before you sell the lot, before you post anything with the words "old hunting knife" in it, do 4 things. Photograph the tang stamp in direct light, sharp. The information that separates a $5 knife from a $500 knife is stamped on the other side of the blade. Read the country of origin. A say means one thing, a Zolingen mark means another. No mark means you ask before you assume. Search the exact maker and pattern on completed, sold listings, not the hopeful active ones. And post the photographs to a dedicated collector forum before you set a price. A real collector will identify it in minutes. A picker will tell you it is probably nothing and offer to take it off your hands today, as a favor. Learn the difference between those 2 replies. It is worth knowing. The knife from that machine shed in Clarkson still turns up, in drawers, in tackle boxes, in cardboard boxes bound for a thrift store shelf. The man who signed it is gone. The shed is gone. The town that knew his name is mostly gone. What is left is the signature. J.R. Clarkson, Nebraska, waiting for someone who can read it. I have held a knife stamped with a man's name and his town, close enough to feel the wear his hand left in the handle, and understood that I was holding the last thing he ever answered for. The object was never the point. The person behind the signature was. If that matters to you, the truth of the thing, not the legend, you already belong here. Tell us in the comments. Whose signature is sitting in your garage right now, unread? And if you want to be the one at the sale who can read the steel while everyone else sees junk, you know where you are. This is lost American arms.